Overnight, the world as we know it is no longer the same. All of a sudden, the world is battling a disease that we have never seen before. At first, everybody downplayed the terror, saying that it was only an isolated case that originated in some tiny province in China. But soon, it became a truth that we can no longer handle. Borders were closed, cities were locked down, economies were shut down, millions of lives are being taken away, and no country, even the most powerful ones, is immune to the disaster of the pandemic. People start wondering, how does a pandemic like this end? Knowing that pandemics are both contagious and deadly. How can humanity survive this?
The enemy is coronavirus disease 2019, or also called as COVID-19. It spreads through droplets and enters the body through eyes, nose, or mouth. It spreads quickly, and once you have it, you may show no symptoms, making COVID-19 so deceitful and tricky. It is also difficult to track and detect. Clearly, we also saw how it affected the most vulnerable in the society, the elderly. Naturally, the world can just wait for immunity to take place. People can get immune without any medical interventions. However, it could take years for this to happen. Therefore, the world relies on finding the vaccine. When enough people are vaccinated, it could mean that the world will see less deaths and infections. But development of vaccines would take time. And as we wait, COVID-19 continues to spread and take lives. Therefore, the best thing that countries should do is to slow down the spread of the virus and flatten the curve. Governments around the world employ one of the simplest ways of containing the spread of any virus, which is social distancing. As people stay away from each other, the virus would spread at a much lesser rate. Government leaders made a resounding plea: go home and stay home. In an outbreak like this, speed is everything. Across the world, different countries employ different means to combat the disease.
South Korea has often been cited to be one of those countries whose early approach to containing the disease has proven to be effective. As of early April, instead of going in a lockdown, they have managed to slow down the disease by implementing wide testing and tracking the steps of people who came back positive. Every day, South Korea government implemented tests and scaled up production of testing kits. Without having to place the entire country on a lockdown, South Korea was able to slow down the spread of COVID-19. Because Korea is an economic superpower, it was able to quickly decide to release supplementary budget to aid in their effort against the pandemic. The government also promised emergency financing for small businesses and to all its citizens except the richest families. Another admirable response would be from New Zealand. Recently, New Zealand made a buzz in the news for being one of the first countries to declare that it had won against the virus. Right after the first case of disease was detected in New Zealand, its government swiftly responded by implementing a level 4 lockdown, which means that people could only interact with people within their homes. Their Prime Minister also utilized social media to connect with their citizens. The government assured its people that no one would lose their residence if they lost work. The government officials also made a symbolic action to take a 20% cut to their salaries to extend support to its people. This approach has been praised by many, saying that it symbolically suggests how serious the government is in combating the disease.
Canada's holistic approach is also worth a look at. Canada has a universal and publicly funded healthcare system that makes it ready for pandemics similar to this. What is interesting with Canada is that they placed importance on science to guide the healthcare response. Instead of relying on military and political responses, they knew right away that pandemic can be best addressed with scientific measures. Canada has learned a lot from its failed responses during the SARS outbreak in early 2000s. They implemented travel restrictions, social distancing, declarations of states of emergency, and closures of non-essential businesses in some provinces. Going back to Asia, Taiwan's response has also been very admirable. If you think about it, Taiwan is just right before the epicenter of the pandemic. Like Korea, Taiwan did not implement a full-blown lockdown. Instead, after closing its borders and banning exports of surgical masks, its government implemented a robust mass testing and contact tracing. It even went beyond the typical approach to tracing and implemented a SIM tracking mechanism to ensure that people are following the quarantine rules. All efforts and rules are centralized by the government.
Here in the Philippines, like most countries in the world, firming an approach to COVID-19 has also been challenging. Philippines mounted a multi-sectoral response through the Interagency Task Force or IATF. IATF is shared by the Department of Health. Various levels of lockdowns were implemented in the country starting from Metro Manila and extending to other parts of the country. Strict compliance of Enhanced Community Quarantines or ECQ is ordered for all citizens with the exemption of frontline professionals. On March 23, President Rodrigo Duterte has pushed for the enactment of Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, which authorizes the President to exercise powers necessary to carry out urgent measures to meet the current national emergency related to COVID-19.
The said act allows the government to reallocate, realign, and reprogram government funds. The Philippines has also addressed the social and economic impact of the virus to the community by providing social amelioration to low-income families. Quite interestingly, unlike its counterparts, the Philippines placed emphasis on militaristic response to COVID-19. Along with the lockdown, thousands of police and soldiers were deployed to the cities. As of the production of this documentary, the community quarantine in Metro Manila remains to be in place as cases continue to increase in numbers, making it one of the longest lockdowns implemented in the world.
The world has yet to see the end of this pandemic. Throughout the world, we see that there are several approaches that countries took. It is not every day that we get to experience a pandemic, and so it follows that responses are also trial and error in nature. Some of the approaches that work for one country may not be necessarily applicable to others.
Still, we see that there is hope. Man's civilization has advanced so well in the past years that we saw a tremendous speed in the ways in which COVID-19 has been tackled. People are much more connected than ever. This allows the scientific community to collaborate in a timely and agile fashion. Clinical trials are underway. Cases are dropping by the day. People are learning how to cope. And soon, slowly, hopefully not later, the world should be able to see better days.